Welcome everybody to today's session on AI in learning and development. My name is Petra Mayer of Petra Mayer and Associates Consulting, and today I have with me Danielle Wallace. Danielle is from Beyond the Sky Custom Learning. She is a custom learning specialist and she is a specialist in AI. Today's conversation is about using AI in learning and development, understanding some of those risks and how to mitigate them, talk about some tools, talk about some tips and some best practices. Welcome to the show, Danielle. So glad to have you here.
It's so lovely. Thank you so much, Petra.
So Danielle, before we start off, everybody's talking about AI in all kinds of life situations. And of course, it's also really impacting the learning and development area in HR, in corporations. How is it changing the world of learning and development that we now have access to AI?
So the tech is at this level. So tech is rapidly accelerated beyond what we can actually foresee. The tech is even faster than what the headlines are suggesting. And yet for the everyday person, and then especially for the learning development professional, we're moving at a much slower rate, much slower than what the headlines are suggesting. So when you're seeing things about what's new and what's being replaced and what's coming, actually we're not really there. So that's the interesting thing that I would say. And maybe I would say this. I tell people who get worried, I'm like, oh, don't worry, you're not behind. Everybody's behind. But at the same turn, I will also strongly say, like, you better step up because the pace is getting quicker and we have an ability to contribute more by benefiting from some of the efficiencies with AI.
So I heard you say that you think that in L&D, we're actually even more behind than in other areas. Why is that? What do you think is holding us back in L&D?
So I've seen this as a systemic challenge throughout the decades. I saw this from a marketing standpoint with marketing technologies, and I saw that learning development developed use cases and implemented technology 8 years later for the exact same tech, 8 years later. And I was really hoping it wasn't for learning development into AI, but I'm definitely seeing the lag. I think it's many reasons why, but in other industries, there is more of a push towards test and learn. There's budgets to support that. There's more data-driven inherent in the nature of that. There's a lot of data in marketing, for example. That's the role. And then thirdly, the reason is that we feel like we're people. So we actually like to interact, we like the human connections. Like, oh, we don't define our personas on how we're using technology. And other industries somewhat do. There's more integration of technology always. There always has been. There's been more data always. It's been always a bit more about whatever the business goals are. Okay, let's sell more, let's ship more, let's drive margins more. That's always been inherent in a lot of the other functions, which have always embraced technology more. And we're definitely seeing this. If I compare marketing to learning development, there's a pretty big gap there. And that's exciting because it means as learning development professionals, we have an ability to up our game. And these are things that have already been proven. And this is ability for us to shine.
It's really interesting because as I hear you talk, I'm thinking about my clients who, let's say, have a learning management system project. And it's such a big project and it tends to take a long time. And there is a hesitation to replace your LMS. Now, of course, a lot of LMSs now have AI incorporated or are working with AI tools. So if the old LMS that they have doesn't have that, it's a big lift for an organization to update the LMS so that they can get the AI tools. But we're ahead of ourselves. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI to add real value in L&D? Not just AI because everybody else is using it, but we want to have a real business outcome. You talked about business objectives and how can L&D support the business objectives better by using AI?
So I see where the practical uses is using AI to help. This sounds cliche, but I actually mean it. I'll tell you why. It's using AI to help springboard the things that we have as a task level that maybe aren't the best use of our time. So the data analysis, which we should be doing data analysis if we're not already, working with subject matter experts to consolidate meeting outcomes, helping define more of those task level work, the low level task level work. I think that's where there actually is a big impact. And I don't say that lightly, because where I see is the tremendous gains. It comes with some pitfalls, actually. The tremendous gains is redesigning the entire tasks, the entire workflow. That's where we will get to. L&D is not ready for that yet. We're still playing here, which is okay. So where we are is where we're playing. That's okay. The real benefits is redesigning the entire task flow. That's what some of the work I'm doing with my team in a very careful way. Looking at, okay, if this is our outcome, to get there might be completely different path, just breaking everything, redesigning fully at the task level, and then redesigning up. Very careful where we are using our human judgment to discern that. And noticing that those somewhat trite examples I gave of supporting course creation. What I'm not saying in that is some of the bigger leaps, because on a mass scale, I think going to bigger leaps using AI to create a course, whew, I've seen the outputs of that without this level of discernment that we have, that leads to some pretty bad results. Polished fluff, or using tools and making bad training faster. So we have a lot of ability to grow in learning and development, and where we are at this first steps is the right way to just drive that efficiency, really that efficiency gain, without using AI to replace some of the critical thinking aspects, which will be actually very easy to offload.
That is a really interesting what you're saying, because what I heard you say is that the big benefit will come from really reimagining the whole workflow. That is scary. And to do that at a time when L&D teams tend to be really pressured to create a lot of good learning with very little resources, redesigning while you're doing that, everything is quite a bit lift. So no wonder that there is a bit of a delay that you mentioned in L&D. Now, you also mentioned there is a danger that we can make bad training faster. Tell us a little bit more about that. How does that happen?
Yes. So if you ask the average person, if every listener looks outside and they see within their town, city, community, you ask anybody what training is, they will all tell you to teacher, to lecture at my university, there's a quiz at the end. It's a video, there's a quiz. Look at the world, and the internet is perpetuates with this idea that learning is teaching. Great, we teach. And then on top, and that's actually part of the danger, because all the LLMs are trained on that. So to the average person, even just using a regular LLM, you have to be really hard to break out of that. Otherwise, all you're going to be getting is just lecture-filled courses with a quiz at the end. So that's at this level. But you amplify that further. There's a lot of brilliant tech companies who I really respect and admire, tech companies though, that don't know learning and development, that when they create tech, it's likewise this idea of training is good. It's like, it's a course, it's content, there's a quiz at the end. So we have a lot of great tech companies making bad training faster. The worst example I would say is, think about the ability to create, I can have a lecturer deliver a morning course. There's so much of that out there. There's so much of lectures delivering morning courses, whether in person, virtual, or pre-recorded. Great. Now I can use AI instead of doing that. I can create an AI avatar delivering my 27-minute lecture course with a quiz at the end. It wasn't good to begin with. Now we have tech that makes that faster. And it's not just the videos. Now we can create an e-learning of a bad course made faster. We can create polished fluff. We can make that faster. We can create training courses, which is what I'm seeing right now, on things that don't need to be trained, because we can.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need more training. It needs more effective training to derive the business outcome. And unfortunately, technology is masking that, because we can do a lot faster. But are we doing the right things?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So ultimately, scale is always an issue for learning and development, and has been an issue. limited amount of people, limited resources to create training. Now we're throwing AI at it so we can create training faster. But if the training isn't well designed, is not effective, doesn't meet the learner where they're at, then we're just accelerating, creating bad stuff. And ultimately, all this bad stuff is out in our LMSs and is plugging it for the people that cannot even find anything anymore. So lots of risks there. So when we think about these risks, what are common mistakes organizations make when they now rush into getting into AI because everybody else does it? I've got to do it too, or otherwise I'll be behind.
Yeah.
What are those common mistakes?
So the common mistakes from a learning and development lens are thinking, firstly, just as a lens of content creation, like I said, what the world thinks of training is content, using AI to create a course. Firstly, do you need the course? Is it on the right performance objectives? And then secondly, the discernment that's needed to really pick through the outline, pick through the objectives, like for real, like the actual discernment. Is this meeting the business goals? That would be the first one. The second one, I would say, as a fallacy that I've seen very smart, experienced, senior learning instructional designers do, is take disparate topics and use AI to create an outline, because we are all told this. Oh, good, it can do some of this work. It can create learning objectives for you. As I already mentioned, those are the right objectives. We still haven't negated the fact of that entire performance consulting up front. Now we can create a course outline with AI, great. But it takes an even more critical lens than now. So this is harder than now to parse out that outline that's spit out, to really think, wait, do these topics make sense altogether? Is this actual timing realistic? Are these activities in conflict with each other?
Mm-hmm.
Is this even the right application activities that make sense? Why isn't there no application activities? There's such a level of discernment that's needed, and it's harder than ever, Petra, because the output is polished. If this was raw, I mean, our brains are like, okay, this is raw, I can parse through this, but it's so polished, it makes it even harder. You take that a step further and say this is not just in an outline format, but it's in the published course format. It's even harder because it's just so pretty and beautiful. But these topics perhaps don't even fit together. Maybe these topics don't belong in an e-learning. There's so many issues there, because this level of human discernment, their critical thinking skills that we already had as an issue, become even more important to exercise.
So it makes me think of, if you see a really well-designed infographic, but the content, the data in it is actually rubbish because it looks so well designed. We just believe what's in it, right? So, and I can see that it's much harder to be critical of something that is well designed and polished than something that is maybe in a rough stage. So having said that, and you've alluded to business objectives a number of times, before an organization is adapting any AI tools, what should they do and how should they review their current learning strategy so that they're better equipped to utilize the right tools for the right tasks?
Yeah. So it's really important firstly to start with the strategy. So really thinking about what is those business outcomes that are needed. How am I aligned to the business? What is needed there? And this is not new, but in this world where we're more pressed for time, it becomes more important. Stop. Like, what is the learning strategy? Like, am I just adopting tools for the sake of tools? Am I doing training for the sake of training, which in itself is another entire issue, which is quite common. And then based on that, what skills does my organization need, or it's classic learning strategy consulting, what's needed to get me to that end outcome. So that part becomes even more important. And it's the same challenge, it's the same fight that we've had for a bit. And so I empathize, because this is not easy, but it's even more important than ever. And then with that at hand, then when we are using AI at the individual level, let's say within the learning and development team, it's thinking about where there is best use of AI and where there's not. For example, especially for somebody more a senior instructional designer, a tip I would tell people is actually don't use AI as your starting point thought partner. No, that's dreadful. Because you're probably going to get an output that's outdated, like content-driven lecture-filled course. Don't start with AI. Start with yourself and exercise your own critical thinking. Like really keep working your own critical thinking, which everybody should be doing. And then use AI to fill in the gaps of what's needed to make some of the repetitive parts, make that faster. And then secondly, I would say from the strategy levels, so is looking at what is that business need, and then what are some of the applications that support that. If the goal is prospecting, what is the best ways of achieving that? Is it an e-learning? Is it applying that skill for real and actually getting feedback? The importance of having the right learning strategy becomes much more important than it ever has been.
So what I also imagine is that many senior learning and development specialists are actually under a lot of pressure to add AI to speed up the process.
Mhm.
And in reality, from what you just said, it makes more sense to slow down and really rethink what is our strategy. Now, can we use these tools available to us today to be not only more efficient, but also more effective? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's about being intentional on where we are spending our time. So some of the things that can't be replaced is the human connections of aligning with your business partners, aligning with the stakeholders. I've seen when that's been automated, and I've seen courses that are beautiful, instructionally sound on the wrong need because that part was missed. So it's being very intentional about where we're putting our time. So that becomes still really critical. Designing and deriving the right learning solution becomes important. Again, this is an exercise of our human judgment. In contrast, then, where we could speed up our time is at the task level, some of the things that would support that. So whether it's changing tone within a piece, whether it's generating visuals, whether it's generating videos, these are all task execution level. Good. Let's automate those things that don't require a senior instructional designer. If everybody, no matter what the role, thinks of it from that level, that provides a nice litmus test.
No, I think there is in general a fear right now that AI will replace people, and especially on the lower areas in the entry level positions. So how can we best use AI to support the L&D team, A, to not replace them, but also to allow that people can come into the entry level and then go up through the ranks and build their experience and still have the experience of those entry level tasks that you said we could sometimes automate them through AI, but we still need people to actually learn the process too. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm on one hand, I'm saying caution about using AI. On the other hand, I'm a strong supporter of using AI. So, and I get the dichotomy of that. I definitely think there's a role still for junior people within learning development, period. But maybe I'd rather not them spend their time copying and pasting from a design document into a course or searching images and image banks to find the right image that we never quite find anyhow. And that shouldn't be there anyhow. They're just ineffective placeholder images, like pictures of somebody working. That's not good to start with. Or to be spending a lot of time on where it's not building skill capability. The skill capability comes through, look, from a learning consulting lens, these conversations with the business. From an instructional designer lens, it's deriving what the right strategy is. It's thinking about what application of activities could be meaningful. Those are skills that need to be developed and can still be developed with our junior people.
Yeah, even if we're using AI in the process of that.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. What advice would you give to smaller organizations that may not have the benefit of access to so many tools? What do they need to consider when starting using AI in the L&D space? Where should they start?
So I'd say firstly is start. Doing anything is better than doing nothing. And then you can engage and learn from that own experience, even whether or not you decide to release whatever you're doing. So firstly is just start. Secondly, I would say is this lens, though I've been sharing, this lens of caution to avoid making bad training faster, especially within smaller organizations where it is more time pressed. Is it really of value to your organization to create a course that isn't actually serving the business need. Yes, you can create it fast, but is it really serving the need? And again, I think of one organization, a senior instructional designer created a course in 7 hours. It looked beautiful, it was great, but missed the upfront learning consulting piece. There's no point. Better to have nothing if you take it from the macro lens than to have something that's ineffective. So I would say, secondly, is be cautious on where you are optimizing without losing sight of it. It has to be effective. We can't just have this world of lecture-filled courses with knowledge checks at the end if you're trying to truly drive skills.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your views on that. And I understand you're fully supportive of AI. And yes, you see the risks and trying to support your clients to mitigate these risks, be aware of the potentials and limit how we're now making bad training faster. So I really appreciate that. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience today before we'll sign off?
I would say go in, like embrace AI. These are tools that we should be incorporating as our way of life because that's where we have some added benefit. But doing so, realizing that your own human judgment and critical thinking become extra important. And what I'm really committed to, and within the learning platforms that I built, is driving that critical thinking component because it's so easy to offload that. So I don't want to lose sight of that, while still I encourage everybody to keep pushing the automation of the task level.
Thank you so much for your insights, Danielle. How can listeners, readers find you? Where can they find you?
I can be reached on LinkedIn at Danielle Wallace, or you can find me online at beyondroleplays.com.
Thank you so much. And we will definitely add those links to the post.